All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today's deep dive is all about the Internet of Things. And, you've sent us a whole bunch of material on it, so clearly you want to, really get what this IoT thing is all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot these days.
For sure. So we're going to try to cut through the noise and get to the heart of it, right?
That's the plan.
All right, so mission accepted. We'll dig through this mountain of info and find the good stuff. But first things first, right? What exactly is the Internet of Things? I mean, the name itself is a bit, I don't know, misleading. It's not like every toaster needs its own website, right?
Right, the internet part can be a little confusing. It's more about networks in general, Any network, really.
Okay, networks. So not just the Internet, but like any NY network where things can, talk to each other?
Exactly. It's all about devices being able to communicate with each other, whether it's through the internet or just like a local network.
So it's about the connections, the communication between all these things.
Yeah.
But honestly, we've had networks and devices for ages. So what makes the IoT so different, so revolutionary?
Well, the real key is the data. The power of the IoT comes from all the data these connected devices are generating and what we can do with that data. That's where things get really interesting and also where some of the concerns start to pop up.
Right, because it's not just about my fridge being smart all by itself, right? It's about it being part of a larger system, sharing data, and contributing to a bigger picture.
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of bigger picture, one thing that jumped out at me from the Wikipedia article was that it mentions trillions of devices potentially being connected. Is that realistic, or are we getting into sci-fi territory here?
Well, trillions might be a future projection, but the growth is happening incredibly fast. The article mentions that in 2017, there were already 8.4 billion devices online, and that was a 31% increase from the previous year.
Whoa, 8.4 billion just in 2017. Okay, so maybe trillions isn't that far off then.
The trend is definitely there, and that's basically the IoT in action, right? More and more devices coming online all the time.
Okay, so let me see if I'm getting this. If the internet was about connecting people, the IoT is about connecting information about the physical world to the digital world.
That's a great way to put it. It's like bridging that gap between the physical and digital.
Yeah.
And that connection is what opens up all these possibilities. Think about automating processes, analyzing real-time data from the real world, and just gaining insights we couldn't have before.
All right, so we're not just connecting things for the sake of it. We're connecting data information about the real physical world to the digital world. And that's where the magic happens. But, one thing that I kind of struggled with is that the article lists a million potential applications. It makes it seem like the IoT is for everything.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming, right?
Totally. So maybe we can, narrow it down a bit. What are some of the most interesting or impactful applications you've come across?
Well, a good way to think about it is to divide it into, say, 3 categories: consumer, industrial, and infrastructure.
Okay, I like that categories. Let's start with consumer stuff. I feel like that's where most people first encounter the IoT, right? Smart homes, wearables, all that jazz.
Yeah, definitely. Consumer applications are often the most, visible and accessible way to experience the IoT. But it goes beyond just convenience and fun gadgets, Take, for example, elder care. The IoT is enabling older folks to live independently and safely in their own homes for longer, using sensors and connected devices for monitoring and support.
That's a really good point. It's not just about, turning your lights on with your phone. It can have a real social impact, too. All right, so consumer applications check. What about the industrial side of things? I saw that the article mentioned this really cool concept called digital twins.
Oh, yeah. Digital twins are fascinating. The industrial sector is being completely transformed by the IoT. Think about factories, for instance, with sensors tracking every single step of the production process in real time. That data can be used for optimization, predictive maintenance, and even creating these digital twins. They're basically virtual representations of physical systems, which can then be used for all sorts of simulations and analyses.
Digital twins, that's like a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So we've got helping grandma stay safe at home and revolutionizing factories. What about that third category you mentioned, infrastructure? I have a feeling that's where things get really big picture, right?
You got it. Infrastructure is where the IoT can really change how we live in and manage our cities. Imagine, bridges being constantly monitored for any structural issues, energy grids that can optimize themselves in real time, even trash cans that can signal when they need to be emptied.
Wow, that's a smart trash can.
Right. It's all about efficiency and sustainability. There's actually a city in South Korea, Songdo, that was built from the ground up with the IoT in mind.
A whole city designed around the IoT. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But, all this connectivity and data sharing, it has to raise some red flags too, right? Especially when it comes to privacy and security.
Absolute.
I definitely want to get into those concerns, but before we do, I think we need to understand how all of this actually works on a technical level.
Yeah.
Because those tiny sensors and connected devices, they're just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
All right, so let's peek under the hood. Now, the Wikipedia article does get into the technical details, but to be honest, some of it went completely over my head.
It can be a bit dense, yeah.
It really can. So maybe you could break it down for us without making it sound like an engineering lecture.
I'll try my best. Let's focus on two key aspects: communication and data.
Sounds good. Let's start with communication. I mean, we've established that the IoT is all about networks, but what are those networks built on? Like, how are all these devices actually talking to each other?
Well, it's actually a bit of a wild west out there. There's like a whole bunch of different wireless protocols in play: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, you name it.
So many acronyms.
Right. And there's no one single standard that dominates, which is both, a challenge and an opportunity. It allows for flexibility, but it also creates complexity.
So it's like a technological zoo with all
Ah.
these different languages flying around. That sounds like it could get messy.
It definitely can. And that complexity has implications for security and interoperability, which are things we can talk about later.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that for now. So we've got communication covered. What about the second aspect? You mentioned data. We know it's the lifeblood of the IoT, but it's not just about collecting it, right? There's a lot more to it than that.
You're absolutely right. The real power comes not just from collecting all that data, but also storing it, processing it, and actually making sense of it. And that's where things like cloud computing, fog computing, and edge analytics come in. We need a whole infrastructure to handle all that data.
Okay, cloud computing, fog computing, edge analytics. My brain's starting to hurt. Clearly, a lot of complicated stuff is going on behind the scenes.
There is. And it's precisely that complexity that makes people a little, uneasy about the IoT. All those concerns about privacy, security, control, they all come from how that data is handled and who has access to it.
It's like we're opening up this amazing Pandora's box, but we got to be careful what we unleash.
Exactly. And those challenges, those concerns, those are things we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so let's get into it then. We've talked about all the amazing things the IoT can do, but I think it's time to, face the music. Talk about the downsides, the stuff that kind of keeps people up at night.
Yeah, for sure. We can't ignore the potential risks. I mean, every powerful technology has its trade-offs.
And the Wikipedia article definitely doesn't sugarcoat things. There's a whole section on criticisms of the IoT. So let's dive into the dark side. What are some of the main concerns people have?
Well, we can kind of break it down into three main categories, I think.
Mm.
Privacy, security, and control.
Okay, so let's start with privacy then. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that if we have all these sensors collecting data about our lives, there's a huge potential for misuse.
Right, exactly. The more connected our world becomes, the more important it is to think about who has access to that data and what they're doing with it. It's not just about, companies using data to target us with ads. We're talking about potentially very sensitive information about our habits, our movements, even our health.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it. Like the article even mentioned things like smart speakers that are always listening and billboards with hidden cameras. It's unsettling, even if they say the data is anonymized.
Definitely raises some questions about, where the line is. And it's not just corporations either. Governments also have a big interest in this data. The potential for surveillance is a real concern.
It's like Big Brother, but in digital form. Okay, so privacy is a big one. What about security? If everything's connected, doesn't that just mean there are way more ways for hackers to get in?
Exactly. With billions of devices all interconnected, the security risks are huge. Like, a single vulnerability in one device could potentially compromise an entire network. And remember that example from the Wikipedia article, the Mirai botnet? That was a pretty big wake-up call.
Oh yeah, the one that took down all those websites. That was a mess.
It showed how hacked IoT devices could be used to launch these massive attacks that have real-world consequences.
Right, so we're not just talking about theoretical risks here. This stuff can have a real impact on our lives. All right, so we've got privacy, security. You mentioned a third concern, control. What do you mean by that?
Well, this one's maybe a little more philosophical, but it's important. As our homes, our cars, even our bodies become more reliant on the IoT, we have to ask ourselves who's really in control. Are we becoming too dependent on these systems? Are we giving up too much autonomy?
I see what you mean. It's like, are we in charge of the technology, or is the technology starting to be in charge of us?
Right. It's not about like robots taking over or anything like that. It's more about the subtle ways technology can influence our choices, our behaviors. If we're not careful, we could end up in a world where algorithms are making all the decisions and we don't even understand how or why.
Yeah, that's a bit of a scary thought. So it's not just about protecting our data, it's about protecting our freedom to choose, our agency.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, embracing the potential of this technology, but also safeguarding the things that matter to us, like our privacy and our autonomy.
So we've explored the dark side, and it's clear there are some serious challenges we need to think about. But I don't want to end on a totally negative note. After all, we started this whole deep dive because of the incredible potential of the IoT.
Absolutely. I think the key is to approach it with both, enthusiasm and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right, to be excited about the possibilities, but also be aware of the risks.
Ultimately, to make sure we're using it in a way that benefits humanity, that creates the better future.
I like that. Cautious optimism. So where do we go from here? What can people do to, navigate all of this?
I think the first step is awareness, right? We need to educate ourselves about the IoT, both the good and the bad. Ask questions, demand transparency from companies, hold policymakers accountable.
And what about on a personal level? What can people do to protect their own privacy and security in this, hyper-connected world?
Well, there are some practical things everyone can do. Be mindful of the devices you bring into your home. Understand their security settings. Be careful about what data you're sharing. And don't be afraid to opt out if something feels, off.
So it's about being informed and taking control, not just passively accepting whatever technology comes our way.
That's it. It's about shaping the future of the IoT, not letting it shape us.
I love that. It's not like a technological destiny.
Hmm.
We have a say in how this all plays out.
Absolutely. The future of the IoT is being written right now by all of us. And the choices we make today, they're going to determine what that future looks like.
Well, that's a powerful thought. It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, we've gone from like figuring out what the IoT even is to exploring all its crazy potential and then to, facing the downsides, the risks.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And for me, what really stands out is that the IoT isn't some far off thing. It's here, it's now, and it's already changing our lives, probably in ways we don't even realize.
Totally. Which brings me to you, the listener. Why should you care about all of this? What's the takeaway for you?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the IoT is transforming our world, and it's only going to get, more impactful. It's not just about cool gadgets or futuristic cities. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping our future, how we work, how we interact, even the very structure of our society.
It's not just a tech trend. It's like a societal shift.
Exactly. And understanding the IoT, both the good and the bad, is essential for navigating that shift. It's about making informed decisions, both as individuals and as a society.
Even after all this, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. Like there's so much more to learn and explore.
Well, that's the exciting part, right? This deep dive was just the beginning. The world of the IoT is huge, and it's constantly changing. There are always new things to discover, new paths to explore.
So for our listeners who want to, keep digging, where should they go from here? Any suggestions?
Well, the Wikipedia article was a great place to start, but I'd encourage everyone to go beyond that. Read articles, listen to other podcasts, even talk to people who are actually working in the field to get different perspectives.
It's about getting that well-rounded view, right? Not just relying on one source.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. How is the IoT affecting your own life, your community? What are the ethical implications? What kind of future do we actually want to build with this technology?
Those are some great questions to really think about.
Yeah.
It's on all of us to stay informed and engaged as the IoT continues to, shape our world.
I agree. The future of the IoT isn't set in stone. It's being created right now by all of us.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been an amazing journey, and a huge thank you to you for guiding us through this, pretty complex topic.
My pleasure. It's always fun to dive into the world of the IoT.
And to you, the listener, thank you for joining us on this exploration. We hope you've learned something new and that you're feeling a little bit more equipped to navigate the ever-changing world of the Internet of Things. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep learning.